Hello, it is Matt Morrison from Tithely. Thanks for jumping on here today. Really, what we want to talk about for just a few minutes is some really practical tips on how we can improve the design of your church website. Design is one of those things that can be very subjective, it can be very sometimes expensive, and sometimes it's a challenge for us as church leaders is to determine how best to make a website that's going to be well designed, appealing for our visitors, and more importantly than anything, engaging so that we actually can connect with people and help remove any obstacles that would help them connect with our church and visit us on a Sunday morning. When it comes to design, we want to make sure that people there aren't any obstacles for them when they're looking at your website, that they don't kind of feel like, I'm not sure this church is for me, or I don't really even want to look at this website for too long because I don't like how it looks, or something just feels complicated, I can't even put my finger on it, but I just don't want to spend much time on this website, so I'm going to go somewhere else. And design helps us really break down those barriers and help them actually connect with who you are as a church to get to the heart of the matter, which is that they can find a home and should be compelled to come visit your church to learn more. And so what I want to do here, like I said, is just dive into some really practical tips and talk through some changes you can make to your website today or going forward here in the coming days that can really help improve the overall design of your church website. The first thing I want to talk about is branding and consistency. This is something that some churches have done where they've actually taken the time to put together a brand board to really establish what are our colors, what fonts do we use, how does our logo look and how should it be used, what kind of imagery do we use, what kind of design elements do we use. And it is incredible when a church actually implements those pieces and uses them consistently across the board, whether it comes to something like your website or any of your marketing materials. If you're printing out brochures or flyers, if you have slides that go up on a Sunday morning, if you have bulletin boards in your church, using those consistent brands does an amazing job of just making things a bit easier for people to kind of capture that information. So if you're communicating an event or communicating an announcement, if every single thing you create has a different feel to it, has different fonts used, different colors, all those things, there's the really subtle moment that happens where people have to kind of orient themselves to what they're looking at, what's this for, who's it regarding, and if they see it and it already has your brand colors established, your fonts established, and it looks the same as the other pieces that you're putting out, then immediately they're like, this is for my church, I know exactly what this is about, and now they can actually begin to read the content and process what you're actually trying to communicate to them. It's the exact same thing when it comes to your website. If they hit that website and that aligns with something else they've seen in the community about your church, or even just page over page, things are looking the same, it allows them to immediately go right to the content and begin to process what you're trying to communicate on any given page of your website. Whereas if everything's always designed differently and every time you made a page, you completely invented the wheel from a design standpoint. Now I have to orient, and I actually have to take those extra precious seconds when I first load up your website or any page to process what I'm looking at and what this is for. Did I land on a different website? Why were the other pages of the website this color, but this one's a completely different one? Sometimes that's okay. There's going to be exceptions to any rule like this, but for the most part, the golden rule we should have is to try and keep things consistent from a font, color, branding standpoint, so that people can really read through the content. So that's just something you can do, and as well as the other pieces I'll talk about today. Just do a simple audit of your website and look through it and say, does this actually feel consistent? Do I feel calm as I go page to page, or does it feel like it completely jumps from one view to another? Because that's what we're trying to avoid. It's kind of that jarring moment from a website visitor navigating through your site. And the second thing I want to talk about is white space. And this is something that we just so consistently see whenever something's kind of designed by someone who doesn't have maybe a trained eye in design, is they want to put so much on the page, they're trying to communicate so much that eventually it becomes just far too cluttered. And it's funny, white space has to do with design elements, but it also has to do with images, and it also has to do with text. And the reality is you have all these tools in your toolbox when you're creating something. And I think what happens often is that sometimes if you haven't prioritized or haven't thought through what's really important, it can kind of feel like everything should be important. Or maybe you have many cooks in the kitchen designing what to go on the website, so you're throwing everything up there. And the reality is that the more things you put up there end up being far more challenging on the visitor as to determine what's actually important. What should I be looking at here? And sometimes if there's too many things to look at, our default reaction is just to pull back. and realize, okay, I actually don't understand what I'm looking at here. I don't know what's important. And so I'm just going to probably either try to navigate to another page or another part of the page to try and figure out what's going on. And if I still feel that, if I still think there's just so many things being thrown at me, then I'm just going to probably click away and try again, or try this search another time. And so this is another one of those moments where what you need to do is go in and do an audit and say, is there a way for us to clean this up? Is there a way for us to simplify this so that instead of writing those 4 paragraphs that talk about us and who we are, we can actually maybe break that up into maybe 2 paragraphs and divide it with an image in the middle, so that it just feels a little bit more digestible. We're really trying to simplify things so that as people are scanning through the website, and really that's the reality, is we're all scanning websites for the most part. There's the odd person who's going to deep dive it and want to read every single word, or some even may print it out and read them all, and that's great for those who want to do that. But the average viewer, when they're looking at a site, is asking themselves questions. They're trying to decide if they're going to come to your church on a Sunday morning. They need to know what time the services are at. They need to know whether or not there's a good kids ministry for their kids to check in at. They need to know how long the services are, or maybe how people are dressing, because they don't want to show up and look really strange when they arrive there. And so they're just kind of scanning to find those answers, and they're removing the different obstacles that they weren't sure about before they attended church. And so you just want to clear up your message, clear up your overall, the look and feel of your site, so that it just feels very digestible as they navigate through and can kind of take in each piece of information as you're telling them. So don't be afraid to just leave spaces in between things, leave gaps, so that they can kind of like navigate through it in a really nice way. And then finally, this maybe feels obvious when we're talking about visual appeal, or talking about design, but is that visual appeal is so important when it comes to your website. We want to make sure that there's just a certain level of quality when we're communicating something. And so I know that, obviously, budgets are what budgets are, and we need to be careful with that and be good stewards of that. But when it comes to something like photography on a website, having someone just kind of snap some quick iPhone photos and throw them up there, although iPhones have gotten a lot better, but the reality is that if something feels very amateur, it means you haven't really invested in your website. And so why should I, as a visitor, invest in taking the time to navigate through it if these photos are kind of grainy or pixelated or just not of a great quality? The reality is that it's not too hard to either find maybe a photographer within your congregation, or find someone on Craigslist for $250 who could come and just attend your church on a Sunday morning and grab some photos of people smiling in the lobby, the worship team playing in the auditorium, maybe some nice shots of the church building that are really going to communicate what it feels like to visit on a Sunday morning. And the clarity of those pictures and the quality of those pictures are just going to, again, take down those obstacles of, does this feel like it's going to be a good experience for me and my family? I feel a lot better if I can just see it all and get a sense of it, and those pictures are engaging and there's people, again, just smiling back at me, as opposed to maybe a distant far back shot that isn't really composed really well. But it's those pieces, it's those moments of the quality of your site that's going to probably, whether it's fair or not, have people reflect on the quality of the experience they're going to have when they visit. It's often not fair, but if you are going to a dog groomer and that dog groomer's site looks like it was built in 1997 and certain links are just broken and there's pictures of animated cartoon dogs, as opposed to another site for a dog groomer that has really quality photos and you can see the location, and they have a little map getting you to the location, and there's a number you can call, and they've thought through all your concerns about taking your dog to this dog groomer. You understand the parallel there. There's one that brings you peace of mind to take your dog to. There's another one that just makes you a little bit nervous about leaving your dog there. The reality is, church can be a nerve-wracking experience for people. We want to make sure they understand what a great experience it's going to be to come to your church, and we're just trying to remove those obstacles. And I think the reality is, design can go a long way to do that. So I hope these tips are helpful. Our team would be here happy to help to talk through this more with you. Tithely Sites is obviously a way you can implement some of these different pieces we've talked about, and we'd love to chat with you more. But happy site editing, and hope this improves your design.